Everyone, welcome along to DigiShift 88, Building Successful Digital Campaigns in Changing Times. So lots of you have possibly left X, probably making ethical decisions about platforms like Meta and thinking about where you keep your data, the engagement we have with tech bros on an ongoing basis, and what does that look like? Social media has changed in the last 12 months, probably more than it has in the last decade, and there's bigger ethical questions than ever before about what we do with social media. That does not mean that we stop using it as a sector. And what we've got today is two guest speakers to help shape your thinking around some of that stuff. So we've got Ali Walker-Davies, who is Acting Chief Executive of Forward Action, a digital mobilisation agency. Ali has experience with a huge range of organisations like Shelter, English Heritage, Blue State Digital. She leads on digital mobilisation programmes and partnerships, helping organisations engage supporters and drive meaningful change. We've also got Serena Snoad, who's been with us at DigiShift before. Serena is an online community expert with over 15 years of experience, specialising in healthcare, patient-focused organisations, and she leads an organisation called Good Community, a consultancy which she founded in 2021 to help community professionals build ethical and effective online communities. Her career has included roles at Alzheimer's Society, and also she's contributes to CMX Connect London, which she founded in 2019. She's a very sought after speaker and has a huge amount of interesting stuff that she's going to bring today, particularly around this notion of the third age of social media and some of the decisions we need to make around that. And Ali's going to be covering 5 trends that we need to be thinking about in 2025. So we're going to cover quite a lot of stuff today. We'll hear from both speakers and then we'll get a chance for questions. So Ali's going to be up first.
Thank you, Ross, and good morning, everybody. Really lovely to see so many faces. It's always nice when you can see the people you're talking to. As Ross said, I'm going to talk about some really top-line trends. So we'll start off with the big stuff, and then we'll move on to Serena's really detailed, kind of interesting snapshot of what's going on with social media. So if I share my screen, hopefully this will work. Doop-a-doop. Can everybody see that? And can you see it as a slideshow?
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is big picture. What are the things that we as an agency at Forward Action are thinking about? So we're a UK organisation. We work with a whole range of charities and progressive causes to do digital mobilisation, which means using digital channels to drive action and to drive meaningful impact in the world. So we are always thinking about digital with a lens of how can we use it better as a channel, or as the channels available within digital to inspire people to take action and to drive change. That's what we think about. And so I've got 5 trends today. And the first one is that social media is a more hostile landscape, but still essential. And I say Serena's going to come on to talk about this in more detail. But I thought, obviously, we know that the picture has massively changed. We know that there are tech bros tech broing in ways that they've never done before. And it means a completely different thing now. There's always been hints of what's coming, but it's really leaned into it. And for me, a really good example of this is the cognitive dissonance of how much things have changed since 2017 is wild for me. And so in 2017, when Trump first came into power, the ACLU in America took loads of action to fight the Muslim immigration ban that he put in, one of his first things. The ACLU became this huge kind of flagship for the resistance against Trump. And who was right there as part of that resistance? It was Facebook. I know this because I went to New York and I worked on this incredible show, which was like the first Facebook live telethon thing. And Facebook put time, they put money, they put resources into this big celeb-studded thing to fight against Trump and what he stood for. And so it was they felt like they were very much part of a resistance. Now, 2025, you've got Zuckerberg standing alongside Musk and Bezos at Trump's inauguration, and we see what Facebook is doing and Meta are doing, and they are not on the side of progressive causes. They are on the side of preservation, and they are on the side of whoever is in power. And so we see that they are doing a lot of things like ditching fact checking, which as a whole is very bad for progressive organizations. They are also kind of being very publicly seen to bend Donald Trump, and they are not pulling back on their support for charities in terms of fundraising. It affects us less, kind of surprisingly, as a result of Brexit and us not being in the European Union. It means that we're not quite so impacted by those decisions, and European charities are more impacted, but it shows that they aren't really investing in charity support in the way that they used to. And also come January, suddenly there was big changes to the way that they were tracking, and suddenly charities were using conversion events to track results, and they had been pulled out with very little warning. So we know that it's a really unstable and slightly hostile environment. But it's still really important for us to be there because it's where everybody is. And there are other channels now, and as Serena comes on to talk about, like there's a lot going on in social media. But one of the things we talk about most with our partners is that the way you present yourself needs to change. It's no longer okay to kind of just have static images of nice looking pictures or things that's going on. We need people talking about things. We see that first person factual breakdown work really well. Greenpeace are brilliant at doing this. Greenpeace have always been ahead of the curve when it comes to social media. It's really good people to look to see what they're doing. RSPB are stunning on TikTok with their kind of very humorous take content. It works really well for the channel, and it's really good to see how an organization that may have been thought of as quite traditional is actually doing some really fun things there and bringing their cause to a new audience. And then this is just an example that we did during the election, which was just doing Vox Pops. And if you can get set up to do Vox Pop videos about your cause, that works really well on as a content as well. So it's thinking about how do you get those? And when you're thinking about this trend and how do you respond to that, what we think you need to do is, as Ross mentioned, make sure you're on the right channels for your cause and your audience. That doesn't always mean leaving a channel because you disagree with who is running it. It doesn't mean necessarily staying there, but it's being really clear about your strategy for being on those channels, making sure you're engaging in investing in engagement first tactics, so using the functionality to do live Q&As, to bring your kind of your cause to life, the work you're doing, and to bring that transparency that social media has always been so powerful for, using the new formats to do that. Finding and empowering the social stars in your team. If you're going to be doing more first-person camera pieces, you need people who are going to be dynamic and engaging, and finding them within your organization so that they can become the voice and the face of your organization, and building that into roles in a way that it hasn't been before. And that's a new thing for some organizations. And then our number one priority, which is number 4 here perversely, is making sure you're building your own audience, because, and by that we mean your email lists and your mobile lists, and you're bringing people into your owned lists, because the social media landscape is so volatile and so easy to change, and the algorithms change. You can lose that access to your people really quickly. And we've seen it happen time and time again. We all built our organic following, and then suddenly we had to pay to reach them. We all built our profiling and our ways of building organic, our paid audiences, and then suddenly they changed the audience segmentation and you couldn't do that. So the best thing to be doing is thinking about, how do we build our email lists? How do we build our phone lists so that we can contact people on our terms? Exciting news on that front is that there are changes coming to data regulation. Not something people say very often, exciting news and data regulation. But there's a really exciting thing coming, which is, and here is the dense slide with lots of data or information, but there's a bill going through Parliament at the moment that includes a provision to extend soft opt-in to exemption to charities. So for some charities in the UK, that will mean that you are able to contact people who have taken an action for you, but not necessarily opted in. You don't need to ask them for the explicit opt-in that was introduced after GDPR came in. And so what that means is that if anyone has made a donation to you, you can give them an opportunity to opt out, but you don't need to say you must opt in, and that will increase contactable databases massively. So anecdotal evidence suggests that that could increase opt-in rates for charities to up to like 80%. So 80% of anyone who donates to you or signs a petition or engages with you could then be an opted-in contact who you can reach out to. That means it's a really, we're not sure of when that's coming in, but it's expected to come in very quickly and as early as spring. So what do we need to do for that? Well, we think as an organization, we're working with partners to make sure they've got great welcome journeys, because just because you're now able to contact someone doesn't necessarily mean they realize that they're on your mailing list. And we kind of want to make sure that we're getting that good quality engagement. The size of the list isn't as important as the engagement that you get with it. So it's making sure that you've got great welcome journeys that are segmented and personalized to what action someone has taken. So some data doesn't just go into your database and get put out into a generic mailing, welcome mailing. It's like thinking about if someone's coming on a petition that's about a specific issue, what is it that they need to hear to become a longer term supporter of your organization? If they've given a donation to one specific campaign, how do you take them on a journey to taking more actions for you? So preparing those welcome journeys, segmenting your audience. The other thing is maintaining good list hygiene. So growing your list, like I say, is brilliant. But emailing people time and again who aren't responding is going to have a negative effect on your deliverability. So it's making sure that you've got a plan in place to say kind of to have a data review of who's not open or responded or engaged with an email in the last 6 months. Do you put them on a reactivation track? Do you say, actually, we're just not going to email them because it's impacting our deliverability? Or you put them in a kind of separate pot? And then the other thing is obviously to stay informed and compliant and make sure that you are up to speed with the changing regulations and how they're being implemented. Talking about email a lot because in our world, email is still king, but we also see maybe a new queen in WhatsApp. So email is something that we've been talking about for over a decade, 2 decades perhaps, looking at kind of how much potential there is for organizations to reach their supporters directly with very low costs. For every 1,000 fundraising emails sent in the UK, charities raised £89. So if the more people you are contacting, the more money you're going to be able to raise. This is why it's so important to build your email list. But there's also an opportunity to reach far more people with more emails. So this graph here is taken from the M&R benchmarks, which if you haven't seen it, we can follow up with a link to that. But it's 2024 benchmarks were released, and they show that on average, UK and Ireland charities send 26 emails over the year. And of those, 12 will be fundraising. Other countries, so this is America particularly, but a lot of other countries are sending on average 52 emails to their supporters a year, and up to 30 of those will be fundraising asks. So in terms of kind of the maths of making fundraising work harder, which is something that we're always looking to do, sending more emails has a really positive impact on raising more money. And so that's something that we are always working with partners to try and encourage them to send more good quality, engaging fundraising asks. And this is just an example of when we've made that work really well. So we've been working with Surfers Against Sewage for a couple of years. And here is this year in 2024, in the lead up to the election, we did a campaign that was our Now or Never appeal. And it was to do with the Big Give Week. So it was a match giving appeal, but we raised £200,000 on email within that 7-day place, and we sent 8 emails over 7 days. So looking back to that frequency thing, it's finding moments in your calendar, either external or if there's something important and a deadline coming up for you, that you can send far more emails and get that kind of response rate. So this is the Now or Never election plan, asking people to chip in at that point to make sure that the organization was ready for the election. And then WhatsApp is something that we are talking about a lot with partners. There is a great platform out there called Movement if you are ever looking to set up a WhatsApp program, which is really good at kind of integrating email and all those things with WhatsApp. But we find that we're using it and testing it for campaigns. In the 2024 election, the Labour team used mobile messaging a lot. They used SMS more than WhatsApp, but they found it to be a really effective way of driving action because there's such high read rates. So with WhatsApp, you get a much higher read rate because people kind of leave emails in their inbox, but they don't leave WhatsApps unread. So if you can get someone to opt into a WhatsApp community or a WhatsApp list, you're going to get a much higher engagement. But it does mean that there's a higher cost per send. So what we're advising at partners is to be strategic about why you're using this platform. It's great organizations like Hope Not Hate, where they're getting smaller groups of really engaged supporters to join them on WhatsApp. It's kind of the next level in a ladder of engagement. It's kind of it's a smaller group who are going to be more likely to take meaningful actions for you. And we see it's really effective for fundraising as well, because you get those high response rates. It's also great if as an organization you have timely news that you can break, or if it's very news sensitive work that you're doing, you can respond to people really quickly, and you can kind of be the first to say breaking news, the government's just done this, or this has happened globally. And we see that with partners, there's a really great opportunity to be an early adopter and to have a more competitive edge, because it's not a widely used tool for charities at the moment for their comms. So that's a really exciting thing. What should you be doing? Send more and better emails. There's always ways we can improve on them. Even organizations who have been doing great email for a very long time, we work with them and we find ways to improve their segmentation, the personalization, or just sending different content that surprises people. Again, build your email list. Cannot stress how brilliant it is to have a big engaged email supporter base at your fingertips who you can contact when things are happening and they can take part in that. And then also explore whether WhatsApp is going to be helpful for your organization. Big topic. Number 4 is making sure you're getting the basics right. So because digital mobilization and digital channels, we've been doing this for like 20 years, right? As organizations, at least when you first set up your email lists and your social media. But actually, there's a lot of things about the basics that are going to set you up for success that a lot of people are still struggling with. So what does that mean? People are using AI. It is really valuable in kind of how we go about our day-to-day business. There are a lot of ethics questions about kind of the origin of the information, about the environmental impact of it. And so we advise charities to be making sure that they are reviewing their usage, looking at how people across the organization are using it, creating a kind of standard approach to that, looking at where a task that can be incorporate AI into it, but just make sure that you're kind of giving, rather than having people doing it off in secret or because they're not meant, don't feel like they should be talking about it, they're doing it and doing it in their own way. It's making sure that you've got a robust approach to that and that you've got those ethical use policies to give confidence to your team. Make sure that your current data tracking systems are accurate and impactful, because if you can't measure it, you can't see what is working. And so we always want to be able to see where are supporters coming from, where are people following us from, what content is working, what's performing. And that will help you, going back to that first point of making those informed channels, decisions about the channels. If you know what's working for your organization, you can say, we absolutely have to stay on X, even though we don't agree with the founder, because it's a really important place for us to do this. If you don't have data systems that back that up, it's anecdotal and you're making judgments without the proper information. And then finally, reviewing your online donation pages, because there's tools like Fundraise Up now, which is a brilliant online platform, very easy to get set up. But I know that a lot of organizations struggle because they have historic fundraising platforms and donation platforms that they're not able to set them up for things like Apple Pay, Google Wallets, making sure that you are able to take mobile payments on your donation pages, because people are going to be looking at your site on mobile and you need to make sure it's optimized. And there are tools out there that mean you don't have to build things from custom, don't have to build them from scratch. They're really easy to get, cheap to use, and going to be more effective and drive higher conversions. And then finally, it's about standing up for your cause. So if you've got the tech basics in place, you know what channels you're on, you know how to contact people, it's making sure that you're really being confident about what you say and making a stand. Because as we know, there's so much going on in the world and people are hearing terrible stories all the time, and they're looking for positive sources of hope and inspiration. And that's what the causes that everyone here works for is really able to provide for society. We work with Sense, and last week the government in Westminster announced that they were going to be making huge changes to disability benefits and disability payments. And Sense, because they had the tech stuff in place and they know their channels, were able to move really quickly to get an email, your MP ask out, saying, make sure your MP knows that you're standing against these disability cuts. It's not what you want, it's not what you expect. They put it out on their social channels. But what I loved about this was I was seeing it in my organic network, because people were so angry about this universally. And they were just looking for whoever, they weren't Sense supporters necessarily, but they were looking at who was the person who was, or organization, leading the charge on this. And Sense was able to be there and react. And so if you as an organization have all the tech stuff in place, you can move quickly and react when things are happening, as they will be in the world. And then my final example is from friends of ours who are wonderful, the People versus Elon team. I don't know if you've seen this, but they've set up very quickly when everything was happening and Doge was, the Department of Government Efficiency, was taking all of its cuts, and Elon was doing his Sieg Heils and all the awful things that were happening. They set up this site, which means that every time Elon Musk tweets, you can set it up to make a regular gift that will take 1p, 2p, or 5p from your account to donate to charities who work in progressive spaces. So it's like basically every time he tweets, it's raising money for charities that are fighting against him. This is an organization, this isn't a charity. These are people who have just worked off their own back, worked really hard through the night to get this set up. And I think not guaranteed, but I'm pretty sure they're also behind these posters that are going out saying goes 0 to 1939 in 3 seconds. And a lot of the kind of just being quite disruptive, quite playful. And that, I think what's really important here is humor, and using humor as a counter to the rage and to the disgust and all the terrible things that are going on. And so finding spaces within your brand to be more playful and to bring some of that light relief and that resistance, that spirit of resistance. So on this, taking a stand, what should you be doing? It's making sure you've got those tech basics in place so you can move quickly, being really clear and confident about what areas you can campaign and comment on so that your team is empowered to think like, that's happened over there. It's not directly related, but our supporters are going to care about that. So we're going to make a stand on it. And it's also about movement generosity. And like, if another cause area is impacted, should you be standing in solidarity with them? Give your supporters an active role to take. What can they do to help you amplify your cause, to make you more impactful in challenging times? And then weaving fundraising throughout the campaign experience. So that sense, email your MP action will have had a donate ask as soon as someone has taken that action. It's not a fundraising ask, it's a campaigning ask, but there's always opportunities to build that fundraising integrated experience into it. There we go. That is a very whistle-stop tour of what we're seeing as big trends at the moment.
That was incredibly useful. Thank you, Ali. We'll make sure slides get out to people afterwards as well. That was really good. Cool. There's loads of questions coming in the chat. Do keep them coming. We'll ask them of Ali once we've heard from Serena. So I'm going to hand over to Serena just now. She's going to be looking at this concept of the third age of social media, and then we'll get a chance for discussion and questions.
Okay, hi everybody. Oh wow, to follow that was fantastic. Thanks so much, Ali, and I learned plenty of things there as well. So it's great to be with you folks today, and yeah, lots to cover today. And I recognise that building successful digital campaigns in changing times is a big topic, but I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about navigating the third age of social media. So I won't dwell on this too much, but just to say that I'm Serena and I've been building online communities since 2008, working with charities and non-profits like Alzheimer's Society and Blood Cancer UK. And I founded Good Community in 2021. That's a consultancy that I run because I was being regularly approached for community building strategy advice. So I thought I'd start working with charities and doing that work as a consultant. So I offer training, strategy advice and support on all things relating to online community building. And I've done the work, basically moderating, creating content, handling issues, managing platforms and leading teams of employees and volunteers. Because of that experience in running emotional support communities, I've got specialist training and experience to help people with online community good practice, safety for your community and well-being for digital frontline teams. So that's me. So I'm going to ask you whether you've been to Rome or to Athens, or if you've seen travel shows about them. Because when you go to somewhere like Rome, and I was there a couple of years ago, you can walk through the Colosseum and you can head down an avenue past the statues of former emperors and meeting places of the past. But the thing about empires is they come and they go. Empires rise and empires fall. And when you're somewhere like Rome or Athens, you notice the echoes of a former ancient empire. And the reason why I mention this is because we are seeing the slow death of centralized social media. The second age of social media is dying. Now, the third age of the web and social media started about 1972, 73, roughly. And then the second age of social media, don't quote me, but roughly late 90s to kind of early mid 2000s. The third age of social media probably started about 2019. And it's really starting to kick in now. They always overlap a bit. So we are now in the third age of the web and social media. You can put your NFTs to one side and forget about the crypto, because this is the age of community again. So we're going to hear people say things like community everywhere. And that means we're seeing people engage across various platforms without distinguishing necessarily between official and unofficial channels. And organizations then have to adopt more flexible and inclusive approaches. In our own lives and for our supporters, we have a fragmented online presence. We talk about different things in different spaces, and that seems to be more of a thing now. It's always been a thing, but it's more of a thing now, that fragmented online presence. But because those huge centralized social media spaces are feeling quieter, getting boring or becoming toxic, there's nothing that's replacing them, because we now have a landscape of decentralized social media platforms. And I've put some of the icons down. I can identify some of those, and I'm an online community expert, so there are some that are newer to me. And this is what I mean. It's a landscape of decentralized social media platforms. And we're seeing a renewed interest in online community spaces. And I know a lot about that. I've probably used about 20 over the years. And there's lots to choose from. And again, there's some icons there. I can name most of those that are there, because the third age of social media is here. Okay, so you're a social media or you're an online community builder, or you're using social media. We probably know that it's not been necessarily a very friendly environment. And in fact, that toxicity and that hostility has been getting worse. We know that the job of managing social media and online community is difficult, with a huge skill set and a lot of responsibility. And we know what it's like to receive unfair criticism, bad faith responses, negative feedback, anger, abuse, and more. You can see here, I prefer mangoes to oranges, resulting in a pretty interesting response. And then we can talk about that algorithm, or those algorithms, should we say, because trying to second guess the algorithm is exhausting. Different formats, different sizes, posting times, trends. We're up a tree with a megaphone. Meanwhile, centralized social media platforms are rolling back fact-checking and moderation, so we have another job to do. And this excerpt here is actually part of a rant that I posted to LinkedIn that started to go viral. The thing is, this hurts. It's annoying, it's worrying, it's definitely confusing. I feel you. But the thing is, there's actually a broader issue here as well, because the world we live in is different. The social media management is more complex and stressful. And part of that is because people are living in polycrisis. Now, polycrisis describes a complex situation where multiple interconnected crises converge and amplify each other. And this is difficult to manage or resolve. And those overlapping and interdependent issues mean it's difficult to ignore that feeling of instability. COVID-19, war, debts, inflation, tech bro culture, climate crisis, inequality, nationalism and populism, funded by dark money and billionaires, challenging democracy and progressive culture that's leading to this anti-woke backlash. I know it's not a cheery topic, but the reason why I mention polycrisis is because I think it's really good to know that it's not you. We are living in a polycrisis, and that means the way we navigate it has to be different, right? So maybe we feel a little bit like the It's Fine dog. I know I have at times, but the thing is, it's okay. We don't have to despair, and we don't have to give up, because we're in the earlier stages of the third age of social media, only a couple of years in. We're all learning, and we're all learning together. And that includes me. I'm still trying to get my head around a lot of these things. And even though social media feels fragmented and organic reach seems elusive, our communities are still there. And when it feels like we're in a deeply competitive space, we know we have value to offer that hasn't changed. So there is a way forward. We can embrace the new opportunities, but we need a new mindset and a new strategy. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 different things I think can really help with that. So let's start by thinking about a tent, because nothing lasts forever. And we have to accept impermanence. And in fact, if you can, embrace it. So why have I thought about a tent? I'm sure many of us have been camping. Some of us have even liked it. But the concept of a tent, I think, is really helpful when we're thinking about this, because we have to remember every social media channel we use is temporary. they're not going to last for a century. It's not going to last for decades and decades. Facebook's been lucky, quite frankly, and Groups is keeping it alive, in my opinion. So how do we do this? We recognize every channel is temporary. We keep our focus on this year, on our organizational goals and our user needs. We experiment and we assess every content idea and campaign. And we use a risk-benefit analysis to allocate the time and resources to each channel. And for many of you, you might be thinking, well, none of that's new. And that's true. The same principles that we've been using in digital comms still remain. We can still think about that. But yeah, seeing the impermanence now, I think, is even clearer. Okay, so what do we think about next? The thing is, nothing lasts forever. And actually, that gives us a new way to consider our digital strategy. Because for every product you're using, you're going to be at one of 5 stages. And this is particularly relevant for social media and community building. So let's look at those stages. So we've got explore. That's when you're looking around, you're watching tech news, you're watching thought leaders, you're just looking at something new. What do people think about it? Has it got legs? Is it useful? How are other people, potentially very, very early adopters, how are they using it? That's the explore stage. Test. That's where you land grab your brand name. And you might just do that. Might just land grab your brand name and that's it. That's fine. You just want to park it and use it. You might be using that platform in a personal capacity and learning about it. That's the test stage. For build, that's where you're starting out. You're adding content, you're building a presence, you're connecting to community. All things are green. And then scale, you've got a clearer idea of what works. You're focusing on engagement and you're increasing resources. And that could include many things. And then retreat. Now, retreat is when your platform, the platform you're using, the product you're using, is no longer serving a purpose or your focus is elsewhere. That's the retreat stage. As a result, you're going to be putting in a minimal effort in growth and resourcing. Treading water, perhaps. Now, the last step usually with retreat is to signpost to the other platforms. And I'd say only if necessary, hit delete, because you'll want to keep your brand name. And that's my strategy for many people who are using Twitter. And I refuse to call it anything other than Twitter. The biggest way to annoy a billionaire is to not do what they want. Okay, so that's our 5 stages for the digital product strategy. So let's think about home now, because in the third age of social media, it matters we have an anchor in the ever-changing and fragmented landscape of digital social media and online community building. So it is wisest to prioritize your digital home spaces. And by that, I mean your owned products, like your website, direct communication channels, like email newsletters and events, smaller and niche spaces, including local networks, niche spaces, and owned communities. And don't forget, your organization is a community. And many comms professionals haven't got that sort of community mindset. And I think that really helps to think about your organization as a community too. So when we're prioritizing home, your social strategy is a bit like fishing. Your aim is to find people and for people to find where you actually are. And in my opinion, that's community everywhere. So yeah, so prioritize your digital homes. And we've thought about a tent, we've thought about home, but what about fortress? How does a fortress help? So I want you to consider how a fortress works, when it's open, when to close the gates, what the boundaries look like, tools you'll use for safety, what it looks like to be resilient. Because when you build a fortress, you focus on sustainability. You take responsibility for safety. You prepare for risk. You invest in developing skills. And you recognize that resilience actually takes energy and resources. But what does that look like in practice when I say fortress? So we're going to need a consistent framework with us, whether we're growing audiences or communities, what that looks like, it's going to be different. But this strategy in terms of building that strength, resilience, etc., what does it look like? When we build like a fortress, we're setting out our vision of safety and sustainability for your organization, your community, your audience, your team. And this is actually platform proof, thankfully. You've not got to have a different strategy for 100 different places. First thing to say is that skills are key to this. Although the platforms and channels change, we need a robust skill set for effective strategy, creating content, moderating to contain risk and harm, handling a wide range of issues, and analysis to capture activity and impact and demonstrate value. And actually those 5 things, that's social media and online community strategy. That's social media and online community skills. There's more to it, a little bit more, but those are the 5 pillars, I suppose, if you're looking in terms of building your social media and online community skill set. So I'm just going to go back, forgive me, sorry. So just think about safety. Safety matters as well, because this is about a holistic approach. Safety isn't just about one thing, right? So we need organizational policy. We need team safety. We need safety for your community members. We need being crisis ready. And we need data security. Those are the 5 things that we need when we're thinking about digital safety. And then we need to think about sustainability as well. And this has many parts. For example, thinking about planning ahead, taking an agile approach, being willing to test, adaptability, and having an exit strategy. So you can see here, you've got multiple different things. You've got key skills, you've got some various different safety, policy and tactics. And then you've got a lot of things around mindset, planning, and how we do things. So yeah, big topic, quite a lot to cover, but hopefully this has been a good overview. But I just want to give you a summary all on one slide. Recognize that we're in the 3rd age of social media, because we are. And it is okay, we're all learning. Think about that idea of a tent. We need to be agile and pragmatic. We need to review our landscape regularly. Think about that idea of prioritizing your home. Focus on owned and direct channels and build community. And then think about fortress. You need to develop platform-proof skills and strategies for safety and sustainability. So that's it from me. If you want to ask any questions, share feedback, and find my social media links, you can read my blog, my website over at goodcommunity.co.uk. And if you're interested in learning from me, and I'm planning an open learning offer at the moment and lifting the lid on 16 years of social and online community strategy and good practice. So if you're interested in register your interest, there's a QR code there. It's 5 to 10 minutes filling in out of Google form. And in fact, if you go over to community/links, you'll see a link to the form there as well. And that's it. That's me.
That's amazing. Thank you, Serena. Thank you, Ali, as well. Just a wee round of applause for both of them. Very, very good. Very insightful. We're going to dig into some of the questions. Maddie, where do you want to start?
I think there's so many questions on it. I think we'll just start at the top. We'll just start right at the top. So that was Caitlin, I think,
Yep.
with our first question.
Do you comfortable unmuting Caitlin? So it's Caitlin Bannatyne. We have multiple Caitlins.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. I just don't know the wrong Caitlin to come up. Hello.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, in my charity, we're looking to move away from X now, thank God, and we're not quite sure where to move to, especially because we're a youth-centred charity. We were looking at Threads and Blue Sky. I just wondered if you had any insight on that, either one of you.
Who wants to take this one?
I'm going to defer to Serena because I feel like this is her depth expertise.
I'm happy to. Sorry, I was just jotting the question down. Apologies. Yeah, okay. Life after Twitter. So here's the thing about Threads. I've been playing around with Threads for a while. If you're strong on Instagram and you've got a big Instagram following, what happened with Threads is they sort of launched the product to try and compete with one of the Twexiduses. And it was a little bit earlier than they should have done. But anyway, so they launched this alternative text-based social media platform, but they've heavily integrated it with Instagram. So people who have got a big following on Instagram are finding actually that following coming over to Threads, it's a little bit more successful. And Threads, the platform, they've got some issues around discoverability, etc. But you sort of find people by talking about various topics, and the discoverability follows from there. But yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. So what I'd say is if you're strong on Instagram, Threads might work for you, but it's still not mainstream. And you'll know that because if you know yourself, your own usage and what friends of yours are doing, how many people are regularly posting on Threads. So I think it's still early days for that, and it's worth seeing what sort of resources that Meta put into it. But what I would say, in any case, if a social media platform starts to gain traction, land grabbing for your organization is always a good idea. With Blue Sky, that seems to be a more natural progressor from Twitter. But again, it's just worth thinking about who's out there on those platforms. So with Blue Sky, there are tools where you can basically pull over, try and find your followers from Twitter and your following and rebuild that way. So there are tools out there that can help you to go hunting, looking for them. But yeah, Blue Sky seems to be more the place for news, for politics, for B2B. And we're seeing more charities set up shop on Blue Sky. In terms of where young people are, though, that's another question. So I suppose land grab the platforms anyway and keep an eye. I don't know about those platforms for folks who are under 25. So again, looking at good practice and what other youth organisations are doing might be a better bet. Hope that helps.
Thank you, that is helpful, thanks.
Ali, you're going to come in as well.
Yeah, I'm just struggling to find where my cursor is on my two monitors. I was just gonna say, like, obviously TikTok is the platform for younger people, and whether your organization is already there, but kind of that, yeah, I think I agree with everything, and definitely that it's kind of more the policy side, and that kind of nerdy Twitter area seems to have moved to Blue Sky. So, and I see a lot of Taylor Swift content on Threads, but it feels quite US centric as well at the moment. But yeah, TikTok, sadly, if that's a sad thing for you, I don't know.
I'm going to share just in the chat box, Meltwater publish quite good demographic breakdowns for the UK every year. So it's worth going and exploring those because that will give you a starting point, but there's not a substitute for speaking to the people that you're working with. So I think the bigger question is, do young people want to connect with third sector organisations? And I think if I imagine myself being a teenager and being on social media and someone was like, which third sector bodies and groups do you connect with? I'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? That's insane. So I think we need to think a bit more strategically and cleverly about how we use these tools. Sometimes really simple things, like I remember doing some work with Peak, the youth work charity in East End of Glasgow. And when they were doing things like their tennis sessions, they would let kids have their phone out, and it was Snapchat was big at the time, I don't think TikTok even existed. And they would let kids basically film that tennis session on Snapchat. So not filming other children, but filming the coach running the session. And the benefit was those young people then tapped into their own audiences about the work that Peak was doing. Peak weren't top down trying to talk to young people and try to build that audience. So there's something there about just that, I guess, that notion of where do your audience exist and who do they actually trust? And it's probably less the organisation and more their peers. Hey, right, what have we got next in the questions? Serena, Serena, you got a question for Ali, I think you had one in there. Is that right? So what digital fundraising tactics are no longer effective in 2025? That's a good question. I think it'd be useful for everyone in the room. Ali, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, big question. I think what we haven't seen significant things stop working. It's just consistently a very difficult thing to raise money online, particularly through paid advertising and the more traditional kind of direct to donate ask advertising. So we always recommend our partners kind of take a more two-step approach, but like building your email list, building those relationships, building that owned, bringing people to your home, and then building those fundraising asks throughout the year. So I think also like the stuff that does work is being really timely. If there's a news story, getting a donation ask out there as soon as possible in response to that. I think I'm not an expert in this by any means, but community events fundraising is still huge, but I think it's possibly more challenging than it was kind of 4 years ago or so, when there was the huge, like where Facebook fundraisers was a big thing and it was really supporting people. I think there's a lot of money still being made in that peer giving, but it's a more challenging thing now. So.
Yeah, I saw a really interesting stat recently, which was 1 in 4 emails that come from friends or family will result in a donation. And it's 1 in 1,200 if that same email comes from a charity. So the numbers don't even remotely stack up. Like if you can't empower people to fundraise on behalf of you, like you're missing huge revenue streams as a result. Right, our next one, Karen's got a really interesting one. Is there any data to show what the sweet spot is between sending more emails and sending too many emails? Really good question.
We advise people to look at that within your own organization and to be monitoring unsubscribe rates and response rates. But I think and it's like you can't send an email a day for 365 days a year. But if you can say this is going to be like, we're going to contact you more. So we've just worked with a huge INGO and we've done a regular giving month and we've used email. I've got a big email file and we're just saying like, actually this month we're just going to email you, ask you to set up direct debit. We're going to email you quite a few times. It's really important. Like that's what we're going to do. And we've had a really positive response rate to that, but we won't carry on with that. We need to mix it up and make sure that we're sending people engaging actions and really making them feel good and seeing the impact as well and then following up with that. So I think not a hard and fast rule, but just make sure you are monitoring those response rates and having those kind of KPIs.
That's really useful, thank you. Right, this is one maybe for Ali and Serena. So Caitlin, do you want to unmute? Because I'm really interested in this. So this notion of like, should you still send emails if your charity is a bit controversial?
Yeah, so I don't know how to say it, but like, so we help people with barriers to employment. So that could be criminal convictions, addictions. Like a lot of people still think like addictions and convictions are just no go, like don't go there. So I was just wondering, like, should we still be sending emails to people kind of, or is that going to kind of put them off and be like, oh, do you know what I mean by that?
So
Yeah, go on, Ali.
I was just going to say, like, so sending emails to people who have taken action for you previously or on your list somehow and kind of giving them more information about the work that you're doing and kind of being very transparent about that. I would wholeheartedly advocate for doing that. And if they're not if you're not confident that the people on your list understand or are going to be empathetic to your cause, then we need to find different ways to build your list to get the right people on there. Because I think like there's a lot of what we do is talking to people who already agree with us. But if you recognize that actually there's a job to do to understand where your list is, surveys are brilliant. We love a survey. They're so good for driving engagement. So particularly if you put a fundraising ask at the end of a survey, we find a really high response rate to that. But like get a sense of who's on your list, what do they know about your organization, what do they care about, and then that can help you inform the content as well.
That's brilliant, thank you.
Serena, anything you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, I just wanted, I suppose, from a kind of moderation or safety perspective, just thinking about when a cause is more controversial and we think about the climate at the moment and what's happening to some causes, just thinking about what information you share, what's safe to share, what format you use, and when do you use storytelling and what does storytelling look like? So there's something about thinking about those things, and whatever corporate comms you're doing, whether it's social media, email, etc., know that anything could be shareable, right? So you're using those principles, but also just thinking about ways of being bold within the context of that. So what does boldness look like where we're also looking after the people who we support, where we're also looking after other people? So there's something about that kind of idea of that protective stance, but also still being willing to share those messages. So the way we do it is going to change slightly, but the cause is still important, right? So we've still got work to do.
Brilliant, thanks both.
Thank you.
Right. A question for everyone in the room. Who has if you have a smartphone, who has WhatsApp on their device? So put your hand up or use the virtual little hand. All the cameras off, people. Yeah, no, there we go. There's loads going up. That's good. Right, okay. So I think there's maybe 2 or 3 people in this room who don't have WhatsApp. The reason I'm asking, I guess, just thinking about Lauren's question there. So Children First, quite strict internal rules for using WhatsApp. How do we get organisational buy-in? I suppose that question is part of your organisational buy-in. It's the most actively used app in the UK by quite a big margin. If someone has a smartphone in the UK, it's very unusual for them not to have WhatsApp. If I asked that same question, who's got TikTok? Would be a certain percentage of people with their hand would go up. Who still has a Twitter account? Who's on Facebook, but how often do you actually use it? If we know that there's one platform, even though it's controlled by Meta and I don't particularly like them, if we know that there's one platform that is that ubiquitous, why do we not have any kind of strategy for using it? It would be a much bigger question than should we be using it. I wonder, Serena, do you want to pick up maybe Lauren and Laura's question? So there's a question from Lauren about organisational buy-in and those strict rules, and then Laura had a question about cost per send on WhatsApp. Maybe Ali could come in on that one as well. But we'll pick up Lauren's first, organisational buy-in on WhatsApp.
Yeah, there's a lot to, I suppose there's a lot to think about there in terms of depending on the organisation you're working for and who you're serving and who you're connecting with. You've got to think about your user criteria, like who should be using your platform. And you've got to think about the legalities around it as well, because there's this rule called COPPA, or there's this legislation called COPPA, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which is a piece of American legislation where there doesn't appear to be much of an equivalent elsewhere. But that's why under 13s aren't supposed to use certain products, because it's platforms, because it's about marketing. But ultimately, what's your user criteria? Who should be using different channels? And what's your content strategy? Good practice. And then you need those escalation and safety measures as well, right? So it's thinking more broadly about those things. So if you can show with, especially if you're working with younger people or people who are vulnerable, that you've got those safety strategies in place, or you've thought about that, sometimes that's easier, because a lot of the time, if there's a risk-averse culture, that can be for good reason. And it's just about making sure that we've done those due diligence checks.
Thanks, Serena. That's really useful. Laura's follow-up question, it's maybe one for Ali and Serena. Laura said, Ali mentioned cost per send for WhatsApp. Is that a premium feature rather than a free version we're currently using? I might have interpreted that incorrectly.
No, there's lots of different ways that organizations can use WhatsApp. So there's kind of the broadcast list, which means you can communicate to large groups, or there's groups having conversations. So there's different ways you can set it up. Either that you can broadcast to many, or you can have small group interactions, or the one that costs the money is like doing it as an email almost. So you can send communication directly to one person, but do that on a large scale. And so that's where I mentioned that's kind of the cost that comes into it, is done through the API. That means that you can market directly to people's WhatsApp inbox, and they will be interacting and responding to you directly. So it's a really powerful relationship building tool to be able to do that en masse, but there is a cost associated with it. Other things that you can do are like chatbots and setting those up. And we've done some campaigns with partners where we've like set up creative chatbots that kind of do choose your own adventure style kind of immersive experiences as well. But yeah, hopefully that answers that.
Lovely. I saw there was a really nice one. There's an American charity that works with parents, and you could sign up, you could put in the age of your child when you signed up, and it would give you a new bedtime story on WhatsApp that you could read to your kid every night, and you would set the time of when their bedtime was, and it would come into your WhatsApp with this new story. I just thought it was like a really nice way of using that functionality that's like still relatively lo-fi, but it's like meeting expectations of those users. The other one, actually, there's a fuel poverty advice service that does their fuel poverty advice. You can get it as a drop-in, come into their office, but you can also get it on WhatsApp, take a photograph of your electricity bill, ask the same questions that you would if you came in face-to-face. They will phone NPower on your behalf. You're only really limited by your imagination, and I would argue that like WhatsApp has much more flexibility in terms of like meeting genuine user needs than a lot of the other channels do. Right, okie dokie. Victoria from Skiaf, do you want to come on, ask your question about moving away from workplaces? Yeah.
Yes, so we do a lot of work with schools, and when we've been out in schools recently and we've been saying, oh, we're thinking of moving to Blue Sky, what are your thoughts about your school moving over to that? And all of them say, no, we're happy with using X just now. And I think the only way that they would move is if the council tells them, no, you can't use this platform anymore, which I guess will happen at some point in time. But what we can kind of do in that in-between period when they don't want to be on these other channels, but we don't want to be on Twitter either, and try and bridge the in-between of that.
Yep. Hey, Ali, do you want to pick up this one?
I can try again. This may be Serena. I think like signposting, obviously that you're doing that. I think understanding, communicating why you want to do it and making that case and kind of raising it as a like there's the itch and scratch and the push and pull. And so you're trying to pull people over. What's going to push them away from it? Like you say, it's the council, but is there like, can you do a bit more of a comms campaign around that, like emails to them, let them know what's happening, give them notice if it's closing down, and they're only going to get information from you if they go that way. The other question, like kind of, is do you really need to leave X? And is that a moral stance? Is that actually destructive to your organization and counter to the kind of work that you're trying to do? And so how to kind of best frame that, I guess, is a question that I would ask.
Thank you. Right, Maddie, we've not got much time, so I'm going to ask you to choose one final question for Serena from the list. You've got the power. We can't answer them all. Sorry.
Let's go for Evangeline with the last question there that Evangeline's just put up.
Are you okay unmuting Evangeline if you're still here?
Hi, yeah, sure. So my question was sort of around like the different content for different platforms. So in terms of LinkedIn and Facebook, how do you balance having kind of more text-driven content and stuff, which is more focused on like visuals? And then with X and Blue Sky, obviously they're much more text-focused, but do you think there's also a benefit to having infographics, as well as kind of like text, or just having pure text post stuff?
Great question. A couple of things to think about there is what works best for your content and then what works best for each channel. So there's a couple of things. So LinkedIn, for example, seems to be crazy about carousels at the moment. And there are ways to create carousels using something like Canva. Basically, you kind of export as a PDF, I think, but there's guides out there on that. So this idea of actually how do you get people to consume the content, what works best for each channel, what works best for the content. And then just keeping an eye on what the social media thought leaders are saying out there in terms of performance for different types of content, and then looking at what other people who are doing content, getting good engagement, what's working well for them. So there's a couple of different ways to look at it. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule either way. But again, your content, if you've got a lot to say, you don't necessarily want to put that all in one post, right? You're going to need to organize that. But actually, if you're going to direct people elsewhere, or if you've got a short video or image, depending on the channel, that might be a better way of conveying the content.
Right, Serena, that was very concise as well. Well done. That was impressive. Thank you so much to Ali and Serena. That was that particularly good session today. I think we could have gone on for about another 2 hours, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, just take on board a lot of stuff that Ali and Serena have said. We'll get the slides out to you. But just open up those conversations in your organisations. Think about the ethics of the platforms that you're choosing. Think about being that bit more strategic. Think about that we don't need to just set up shop in the usual suspects, that we can do much more community-based engagement with people. Yeah, good luck with it all, everyone. And I'll see you at the next DigiShift. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank
That
you.
was excellent.
That was good. I need to shut off because I need to go and do a talk.
Great, thanks, folks.
Excellent. Well done.
Yeah,
that was really
thank
good,
you.
Serena.
See you later.
That was really good. Thank you.
Bye.
That was
Bye-bye.
good. That was a good one, eh?
That was good. Well done. Enjoy your day. Senior
Well.
leaders tomorrow.
Mhm.
I'll put you a message up at what we did last time for this session, so that we'll probably just do the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be on WhatsApp if you need me as well.
Okay. Enjoy your day, Ross.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.